Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Abla, ECS team, Dr. Ziad. My apologies for not being able to be with you today. I am in Brussels for a negotiation and meeting with the corresponding trade ministers in Brussels, which, again, an important topic for our trade ministry. To address the question in hand, I think any country, any developing economy needs to address few policies that investors would want to see. We need predictable, transparent, clear policies for the investors. In the case of Egypt, what we're trying to work together as an economic team is to have a clear monetary policy, fiscal policy, trade policy, and eventually an industrial policy. Investors would like to see, for example, a tax rate for the duration of the investments. They want to see stability in the policies. They want to make sure that the law will be applicable and applied across all segments of the investment society equally to that effect. What we're also working on in the case of Egypt and as a developing country as well is to make sure that we have a business environment that is conducive for business, that can really help us deal with the existing investors and make sure that the investors are actually having the right environment. Because in most of the studies we find that the local investors are actually the potential, almost 40% of the potential of the FDI that we anticipate. We also want to make sure that we attract FDI to the country to utilize Egypt as a hub for exports. And we utilize our location and the potential for the country to be a hub for exports and industry and industrial, in addition to other segments as well. In terms of the opportunity, in terms of where we see Egypt and some of the challenges as well to that effect, let me start with some of the challenges. Again, we're talking about trade. I think the trade policy in Egypt needs a lot of work. The fact that I want to see Egypt open for business, open for trade. We've looked at the situation in terms of our trade today between our exports and imports. I think we need to clearly say that we don't see an issue with our imports. It's an issue with our exports. Our exports are too tiny for the size of the economy, close to 10% of the GDP. Our imports, in terms of size, 20% of the GDP, and 83% of the imports are actually components for the industrialization or internal consumption, and some exports in the cases. So the reality of the matter, our focus will be to open trade, to make sure that the release of goods at the borders up to the international standards. Competition, we need to make sure that we're competing with several markets that are actually way cheaper, and in terms of time they are actually way less in terms of the clearance in our time. So these are some of the areas that we see that we have deficiencies, and we already started convening the meetings with the relevant groups, and we have certain targets to address the time of clearance and the cost of clearing the goods in Egypt. And thirdly, I would like to improve Egypt's ranking in the trade, in the global trade competitiveness standards or maps. Some of the sectors and some of the opportunities we see very clearly. I mean, one, any labor-intensive industry Egypt is very competitive. Intermediate industries, engineering talents are quite abundant in Egypt, and I think we have the quality to build industries. We're seeing Egypt as a hub for some feeder industry for auto manufacture, for example, the wire harnessing business or wiring for the auto industry. We have 3 or 4 multinational companies that are actually dedicated fully for exports, the white goods industry, and many other industries that we see competitiveness. Again, I don't want to miss food industries, agro industries, of course, others that we find quite competitive. We have some challenges, and we know the challenges very well. We have a solution, and we started the implementation for some of those challenges. In terms of the opportunity, I think we have a great opportunity, and I think we need to capitalize on those opportunities as we speak. So I think Egypt's advantages are very clear today. It's our abundance of labor force. very competitive in terms of pricing vis-a-vis markets in the Mediterranean or the GCC in Europe. The labor cost in Egypt is around $200. If you compare that to Morocco, it's around $500. In Turkey, $1,600. In Europe, it's much more. And we have good quality labor force that is actually, with minor training, could be fit for a lot of the industries that we can attract. The second most important is that engineering talent, mid-management calibers is actually quite strong. Engineering talents are also very competitive in terms of pricing. And we're seeing industries that are actually localizing in Egypt and fully dedicated for the export market. Companies like Valeo, for example, the French company that is doing software for the auto industry that is exporting that service for the world. And many more of these companies that are localizing and finding Egypt as a hub for exports. Egypt location has always been on the agenda, but location without the proper infrastructure is not something that we could sell. Today, with the infrastructure that has been put over the past 10 years, we have a major advantage to utilize our location. What we've invested in infrastructure over the past 10 years is close to $500 billion. Last week, we've attended a presentation by the Minister of Transport and Industry, and he quoted 2 trillion Egyptian pounds of projects in the transport sector, spanning 7,000 kilometers of road, railways, public transport, high-speed rail. All of these are actually fundamental for the competitive in Egypt. When we talk about ports, the new ports that have been established, the expansion of these ports, the quality that we have put in terms of the connection between these infrastructure facilities and the industrial zones are actually something that is actually making Egypt very attractive to be a hub for export and industry in general. A third component of what we see as a major advantage is actually the trade agreement that Egypt have signed over the past several years. These trade agreements can open the market for the Egyptian companies or any company that can localize in Egypt to open markets in Africa, in the GCC, in Europe, in Latin America. These advantageous trade agreements are a real asset. And actually at the Trade Ministry today, we're actually trying to review these trade agreements, and we're trying to see how can we maximize the benefit of these agreements to the best of the country and to the best of our industry to that effect. So all of these components are actually positioning Egypt as a very, very attractive hub. But also we have one major advantage that we need to also position in the world that we're seeing today, which is the green aspect of things. Egypt's biggest wealth is actually our green potential, our renewable potential, our solar and wind potential, which really could be in the tens to 100 gigawatts of potential. This is not only for generation and the linkage to Europe and to Saudi that we're trying to work on, but actually eventually what we want to position this is actually that we can export green products. And that's the potential of Egypt. We see Egypt, if you combine all of these factors, the location, the labor force, the engineering, the trade agreements, and the renewable energy as real hub for green products for the future. I'm optimistic to see this, and we will try as a government, as a team, to make sure that we capture this opportunity, especially with the supply chain shift, with what we're seeing from an interest from Asia to Europe and to the Middle East to really come and build facilities in Egypt. And that's our job, and that's our opportunity to capture. Thank you very much.